What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Axioms on Trial. Let us know if we have audio stuff figured out and all that good jazz, if you can hear us. I am J Mike. Alongside me, Cease to Know. If you want to support us, you can support us at patreon.com/Axioms on Trial. You can also support us with a super chat or with just a like or a subscription. So all that out of the way, Cease, why don't you just run down kind of what we'll go through, and then I'll add my little caveat, and then there you go. Yeah, we'll start
Sure.
from there.
Yeah, I'll go over that, what we're doing today, and also some of the plans that we have for the future as far as some topics that we'll examine that I think should be interesting. I think the guy's name is Mike Winger, if I'm not mistaken. And I want to go
Let
through.
me interject. You think I know because I'm familiar. I think you're kind of stumbling upon them, right? You're more into like more of the philosopher types, not like Christian apologetic specifically.
Yeah, I
Probably.
mean, generally, like, I think what I want to do with this show is deal with concepts that are more interesting, like physicalism, consciousness,
Sure.
you know, morality, a lot of stuff that I think, and like I think I mentioned this last time, I'm planning on at some point either doing it with you or doing it on my own, like a part, like a series where I go over different uh, philosophers and their
Sure.
ideologies, or Wittgenstein, Merleau-Ponty, depending on where I
Sure.
feel like going. But I do think that from time to time it's important to kind of shed light on bad apologetics, because they do have an influence on the way in which people think and hold on to these really toxic ways of thinking.
Sure.
And part
Well,
of what I'm
so I guess there's a lot there to unpack. Because my first thought goes to, do you mean like are you talking from a like an implication standpoint of the belief, or like?
everything from the implications to the consequences on behavior of having those beliefs, the ways in which those beliefs then shape the way the society as a whole functions.
Sure.
And I want to. So while I agree with some of the comments that we've gotten, that some of these people are kind of like low hanging fruit in a way. At the
Yeah.
same time, it's like, yes, but they have enough of an impact that it is important to examine what they're saying to kind of show why what they're saying is so problematic. Um, and I want to do that with Islam. I want to do that with Christianity. I want to do it with any kind of ideology that I think is toxic and is having an effect on the way people think.
Sure. Oh, by the way,
Um,
don't mind me. I'm very unprofessional and didn't put my headset in, so I'm just gonna do it live. That's the way we run. We're very unprofessional. But anyway, go
and
on.
also, what we were saying at the beginning earlier, like before we went on, like something about the lighting makes you look like a
Oh
vampire.
gosh, yeah. So I've been struggling because, well, there's two things I want to mention. One, we've been exposed is the first thing I want to mention.
Yeah.
I feel like me and you've been exposed because that is the truth. We were on the phone before the show talking about kind of how tired we are. I've worked since 2 a.m, so I haven't gone to bed. Though I didn't really do much. I kind of got to sit down and really relax. So
Yeah, I'm perpetually exhausted, so it's just my
yeah,
default.
but yes, we have been exposed in that sense. We are pretty tired. But it's not indicative if we do a Mike Winger episode that we're tired. So it's like, hey, let's do the easier. It's just legitimately what was kind of next on the list.
Yeah.
And there was a point to be made that, um, if it's low hanging fruit to the audience, just let us know. We even with this, we kind of went into it. I haven't really got to see any of it. Ceases, I think, got to see a little bit of the clip. It's an hour and a half, so we will not get through it all.
No, we're probably not going to get through even most of it.
We'll
There
just
were just
we'll just get through a few points and then that'll be it. But if it's really bad or just really shitty and everyone's like, fuck this, right? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
We have backup things we can do. I really want to talk with Cease about morality again. And so maybe I can get an impromptu conversation about that. If not, then we can just go through this whole, or not whole thing, but up until an hour and a half for our show.
I would be fine with changing it up. Like,
Sure.
like I'm not tied to anything in particular, but like when I hear something that like kind of gets under my skin, I like to address it. And so there was something in this video I think earlier on that really annoyed me, and so I want to at least get the chance to discuss that part.
Well, and for all I know, this is gold. I don't know.
But frankly, I mean, even I don't necessarily feel like spending an hour on this guy.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that said, everybody, we don't do 3:40 Eastern time shows very often. And so what you get is what you get on this one, as well as really all of ours. We don't, there's going to be more in the future where we really sit down and have a kind of a plan. Me and Cecil are always kind of the same, where we just kind of go from the dome, which is why I guess I want to stress at the beginning of an episode right here now when I can. If you go back and look at positions that, I guess I'll just speak for myself, positions that I had or have, it just could be the case that I no longer hold that position. I'm a skeptic kind of first and foremost. So if things have changed or things have been said where you could go, okay, I thought your position was this, just bring it up, because positions have changed, or, because I've gone off the dome, I might have said something wrong, and I'd love to be corrected if it's just the case that I said something that's just wrong. So just wanted to get that out of the way. I've been thinking about that. But yeah, so I think we're good. Cease kind of filled them in on what the topic is while I get the share screen ready.
Yeah, so it's Mike Winger going over, I think, 20 questions. And some of these deal with the accusation that Scripture promotes evil things. So we'll talk about Scripture promoting killing, rape, and slavery. And I don't know what some of the other questions are. I know that I mean he has them listed in the video, so we can it's time stamped and everything. But he's making excuses for what I think is so obviously problematic in the Bible, by kind of evading the problem and whining about, you have a problem with this because you have an entitlement, or there's something wrong with your heart, like your heart's not in the right place, like that kind of bullshit apologetic. Really, it's really annoys me. So I wanted to address it.
Sure. Well, so it's almost as if like the heavens opened up and, hold on. You know what? I don't know. This is probably embarrassing if I do, but it's almost as if like the heavens opened up, because this is Dr. Josh. He actually wrote a book that I own. I don't even know where it is. This is a stack of books. I could just be wrong in my placement here. Anyway, he has a book called, I believe it's called, Does the Old Testament Endorse Biblical Slavery? Hopefully I got that title wrong. I'm sorry, Josh. I worked at since 2 a.m. Oh, I don't have the.
You mean you got the title right?
It makes me so mad. Anyway, it's a good book. Still getting through it because I have like a big backlog of books. And who was it that gave me that? It was Jeff, Atheist Troll, that gave me that book. I want to get him on the show at some point, so to talk about this, because this is actually it's related to, I think, what Mike's saying. I haven't watched this, but hopefully it's related to that. I think you said biblical slavery, so
yeah, in part. I mean, he goes over other stuff too, but that's one of the things that he addresses, is this idea that the Bible promotes slavery. Yeah, okay. No, I'm not familiar with Dr. Josh. What is his background?
He has I don't want to hopefully he can give his credentials, because I had an interview with him when I was doing Atheist Roundtable but I can't remember the specific. I think it's like Old Testament studies, something specific that I could not relay, and I don't want to even pretend like I know. He's renowned, I will say.
I would love
So-
to have him on.
so,
We're always trying to get new guests and people to come on, so it would be a great conversation if he's
Sure.
interested.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be easy to do based on a schedule. So
Sounds good.
Anyway, yeah. Well, so we'll go through this. Sorry for my fumbling there because I thought that was actually very ironic that happened at that time. So, because I'm actually unfamiliar with this video, so we will dive in now.
Let's see.
Audio's good.
Here we are. Welcome to the Friday live stream Q&A.
You hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him fine.
Today with me.
Do I need to skip to past a?
Yeah, I think he starts. The first question is at 48 seconds. If you just want to, or wait, what? Would that go backwards? Maybe he's timestamped it incorrectly. Whatever.
And I'm going to get to the first question today before I tell you more about any of that stuff. And that is this one, quite a challenging one. I've been challenged, the anonymous question, it says, I've been challenged with the accusation that the Bible promotes killing, rape, and slavery, quoting Numbers 31, 15 through 18. I don't want to simply prove them wrong. That doesn't address this person's heart. Would you please help? and I guess,
All right.
Can you guys understand why, like, the whole narrative of atheists being angry or arrogant or like condescending, like when that's the kind of narrative, like, or the kind of, I don't even know how to say it, like already he's starting off, lecturing other people about their hearts and assuming their intentions and having this kind of talking down to approach.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong about everything that I believe in as far as philosophy, but I've put in a lot of work in sort of constructing my worldview and having the ability to defend my worldview. And it's why I think I react with frustration sometimes when I hear people talk about these issues who I don't think have done the same.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure that he's knowledgeable, at least somewhat, about the Bible. But anytime that you hear, when he was attempting to talk about philosophy, like when he was on Pine Creek's show,
Mm-hmm.
it was just embarrassing. And that kind of unearned arrogance is what triggers me, I think.
Mm.
So I just wanted to throw that out there for a second.
Yeah, no, sure.
Sometimes it's good to just throw the hardest question you got at me. And the thing that makes this hard isn't the issue. So, I mean, the issue is challenging. Don't get me wrong. It's the heart. It's the person's heart. That's the challenge. So
what does it say, though? It's like, let's do a quick Google search. Is it Romans 2:15? Yep, Romans 2:15. Cool. Thank you, brain. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while the conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. And that is the English ESV. So when I hear that, for me immediately, and I'm just speaking from me, and people could just think I'm weird, and that's fine. But from my perspective of like growing up with friends that are Christians and talking about this, and the fact that I can throw Romans 2:15 is that I've had so many people cite this to me and say like, well, it's kind of, it's written on your heart, right? When you talk about that and he's saying it, I'm going to back up and make sure I'm hearing it right. But what I'm worried about is kind of like the way I interpret that verse is kind of like a determined at like there's all these antecedent factors that God is placing, right? That are like necessary to the way that you are. So if it's Satan that does the same thing, then that's what's written on your heart. Like, right, you don't come out smelling the roses any differently, right? It's always going to seem great to you. You're always going to come, right? Because
Yeah.
it's the thing that's instantiating what's on your heart, right?
Well, he's probably gonna say that we're like suppressing what we know is true and what we should be doing because we worship ourselves.
Well, so no, I'm making a different point. I'm making a point that's it doesn't matter if you're admitting the thing is writing it on your heart. My objection is that is like a level of it's very arbitrary, because whatever writes, it doesn't matter what ontological thing it is that writes X on your heart or Y on your heart. It's always going to seem like that's the good thing, because that's just what it writes on your heart as good, right? It's like an analytic definition of what good is, and it's arbitrary, right? The same way that someone says, well, I think slapping you in the face is good, and something Satan wrote that on my heart, right? It just seems like a very weird point for me to make. But sorry,
I don't think it's weird. I think that's the problem with attempting to.
You're getting some weird static noise.
Can you hear me better now?
It's gone. Yeah, it's gone.
I think that's the problem with trying to ground moral truth in theism, is that its foundation is inherently arbitrary and subjective, as opposed to what I think I'm doing with my moral framework, which I know we have to go back to having the conversation.
Sure.
But I don't think that, from my worldview, values are arbitrary. And I don't think they arise from thin air. I think there's a reason why they're what they are. And I know we don't, at least currently, agree on that point. But I think I have something that I can provide that he can't in his worldview.
Sure.
But
yeah. And for any new viewers, the distinction there is Cease is a moral realist, and I guess I always say anti-realist, but I'd say specifically I'm a subjectivist. But
so let me say there's two things going on here. We're going to read the passage in Numbers, but there's two things going on here, at least in my opinion. And the two things are, one, understanding things in context. That is actually knowing what the Bible says. Because for someone to say that the Bible supports killing, rape, and slavery is manifestly wrong.
Okay, so maybe, I don't know, maybe Josh disagrees, and maybe he can shed some light, right? But like, I'm talking to little Timmy, and I'm like, hey, Timmy, I'm having trouble with, this verse. Me and Timmy are talking, and, it's just us reading this. I don't have any expert. And I go to 1 Samuel 15:3, and I see, now go and smite the Amalekites, utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, both slay man and woman, infant, suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and ass. And I know maybe Josh like cringes at that because he hears atheists specifically cite that a lot, and I think that's a partial reason of why to cite it, because it does seem like, what is it, an instruction to Saul, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm wondering at like which point for things that you could point out where you dance around the question, if it's not that specific verse, right? Like what is it at which those things aren't being endorsed? If it's not that, what is it about Genesis 6, I believe, where God's just putting the baby's heads underwater himself, essentially, that isn't the promotion of killing and starting over? If we have to like redefine endorsement or promotion in a way that isn't currently the usage per ad populum, which my version of words and their meaning is just based on usage, on the amount of people that use it, right? It's based on ad populum use. Then I don't know. Then to me, you strip away any kind of meaning for anything at that point. And I feel like I can just play that game with anything, like any position. If someone goes, well, there's a contradiction in your position, I go, well, I didn't actually mean that. I meant something completely different that avoids the contradiction, right? It just seems to me to be sloppy at that point.
I'm happy with addressing the context. Just that every time people like him try to provide the context, it doesn't resolve it. It doesn't make it any better. I mean, I don't see what context is a context that makes slavery, rape, and killing okay. And where I think, and I do want to at some point review the clip where he goes on Pine Creek show, because he arbitrarily defines justice as what God decides to do, which is no different than endorsing tyranny. Like, you haven't addressed why the thing God does is just, why eternal punishment is just, and
Sure.
and so let's see what he says.
Sure. I mean, I would have a different assessment in that too. It's just that I don't care what kind of descriptive assessment you give me. I don't get where the normative comes into play, but
Sure.
It's just not true. It's not a fact. That's not true. So that you can do. You could show the passages in context, talk about them, and we'll work through some of that. I mean, like, quick preview for you, because I'm not going to go into all these details. This would be a 3-hour video just on one topic. But the idea of killing, I mean, God forbids killing. You shall not kill. You shall not murder, in particular, right? And so the Bible doesn't support killing. Like, someone's going to go out and just start killing people and be like, the Bible supports me killing.
No, but nobody's saying that.
Yeah, so like, though I'm confused because, like, when like Genesis 38, to me, Genesis 38, 8 through 10, God kills Onan after Judah professes to him that he should bear a child with his brother's his dead brother's wife, right? And he refuses to do, or he basically deliberately pulls out and spills his seed on the floor, and God kills him. To me, I don't know how you say that that's not a promotion of, like, you're saying that the act, the consequences of the act from, like, a consequential standpoint is actually justified within killing, right? Like, there's always these circumstances where killing is the answer. I don't understand where that's
we're 2 minutes. We're 2 minutes and 21 seconds in, and he's already strawman the position. Nobody's saying that the Bible promotes killing in every situation. Like, oh, I just feel like killing. It's okay because in this thing here in the Bible, somebody was killed, so it's fine to just kill in any context. Nobody's saying that. The question is there a context in which killing is supported in the Bible? And if it is supported, is that justified? Can we justify that morally or not, given what we understand or define morality to be? So already he's attacking a position that most people don't hold when they're making these accusations.
People, like, obviously this is a crass, horrible, and immoral way to try to.
Well, so did he not say that it goes around promoting killing or murdering, right? He said it doesn't do that. I wasn't making the statement of it promotes something that's immoral. I'm just stating, like, what the act in which it promotes, right? Like killing.
Yeah, he's saying that he doesn't promote killing.
Right, like, I haven't gone to, like, okay, do you think there's, like, a normative assessment of that is wrong?
Sure,
right?
sure.
We should not do that. I haven't gone there yet. I'm just going, like, the action at which we would analytically define as slavery or
killing, sure.
or killing, that's being promoted, right? We're on the same page. That's his claim, is that it doesn't promote those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so I already think that's patently false. The moral things is a separate argument.
Sure.
That which, by the way, is a good time to mention that not this Thursday, but next Thursday, I have a debate with John Fisher. I think he goes by John Fisher 2.0 on moral realism versus moral anti-realism. He is a Christian, I believe. So
I talked to him once. Yeah.
Okay, cool. He seems like a really cool guy. So I think it'll be a cool debate, cool conversation. But anyway, we'll mirror it here. I think I have a few debates that I need to mirror here before I get to that one, but we'll eventually do that. Anyway, let's move on.
That represent scripture. If they say it supports rape, like, that is completely false. We'll talk about that in this passage today. And then in slavery, I mean, if if the rules in the Bible that were regulating a practice that has been worldwide for most of human history, slavery, if those rules had been put in place during, say, early America, all the slavers would have been executed. Did you hear me? Right? And slaves, if they ran away from somebody who was a slave owner, they would the town they ran to would be forced to provide them a place to stay and required not to send them back to the person they ran from. You see, it's very different. Like, these are the actual
I'm trying to I'm trying to see, like, he's making like some like rigid designator between the two, as if that well, we have a Christian in here saying that that's patently false. I don't know if he's referencing what Mike just said. But my thing is that it seems to be am I wrong that that there's just an obfuscation on whether or not, like, there were people owned against their will? Like, why?
Yeah, this guy's
I don't understand. Like, so can someone in the comments or someone point out to me that I'm focusing on the wrong thing? Like, it doesn't seem like you have to go far outside of, like, there's people that are owned against their will, or like, like, even if I granted you like debt slavery, like, I'm wondering about like the specific versions of like chattel slavery of like the women or the infants or things like that are kind of born into the systems. I know Josh, that's kind of what I was reading. This is about a month or two ago when I was reading his book. But I'm curious about like the positions of like chattel slavery, because like if I just granted debt slavery as like some voluntary will of being owned, and that's like not what we mean by the slavery part, which I have issues with that. Like, even if I granted that, I'm still stuck on the chattel slavery part about it, where there's still the essence of being owned, not having the same rules for the women, or just for like the children that are born in virtue of the slave that provides a wife for the master, as opposed to him coming in with one.
Well, this is why I find this kind of apologetics to be so repulsive, because it's just a dance around the reality of the situation. Like, yeah, you can claim that the Bible provided a framework to somehow make slavery better than it was before that. That's not the point. The point is, you either are owning people or you're not. And the fact that you can say, well,
so are you just saying, regardless of like whether or not it's like for a debt, it does that's
it's not relevant. Working because you're trying to pay off your bills, is not the same thing as being, owned as a person, which is what happens in the Bible. And the fact that, in some passages, one can argue that, oh, your master is supposed to not mistreat you, is not relevant. Aside from the fact that there are, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that there are verses where it basically tells us that even if our master is cruel, that we should follow our master regardless.
Peter 2:15 or Peter 2:18.
Right, you're better.
First Peter. Let me see.
Right. So, but all that aside, it's not like it doesn't make any sense.
First Peter 2:18. Sorry, go on.
You have this God that has the power to tell its creation how it wants us to behave, except when it comes to the worst kind of behaviors and cultural structures. Mm-hmm. Then God is too powerless to tell us enough with the slavery thing. Why? Because it was practiced everywhere in the world. But God is all powerful and all loving, but He can't tell us to stop with the slavery thing.
Yeah,
it is so contradictory, and it is so clearly nonsense, and just making excuses for real human suffering. That it really annoys me.
Yeah, I just wonder how like the law given to Moses is somehow not indicative of the good nature, right? Like, This might go on a slight little tangent, but right. So like, God can't. I always hear this from presuppositionalists that like God can't do things against its nature. Right. And people who say this against like omni properties are going to be like, well, God can't create a squared circle because like it's against his nature. And what I hear about that and what's weird to me is like God for some reason can create liars or dishonest people, even though its nature is reflective of honesty. And I always bring this point up to show why logic is, like the laws of logic are sovereign over God, or it's something in which God isn't sovereign over, I should say. To point out that like it can do all these things where it has dishonesty in the world or things that are against its nature. But then like for this example, right, like it's now a situation where if you're gonna say, like, you're gonna have to commit, I feel like, to two things, or one of two things, like whether this is reflective of his good nature, if you're just saying God is good, like this is a law passed down that's reflective of his nature, or it's not. And then in that case, you're just admitting it's an immoral thing, right? The same way that you'd be admitting that like God instantiating like dishonesty in a human, like as a particular, isn't reflective of its nature, yet we still come from God and we can still exhibit some form of dishonesty, right? I feel like you just have to commit to one of the two based under the kind of metaphysical commitments that you have there.
Well, I think they would just argue that it's better to have, in quotes, free will than not. So even though God is perfectly good, somehow in the perfect goodness, in his design, he threw in the capacity for us to make choices on our own. Mm-hmm. And so if that choice ends up being an evil choice, they would say that's not on God, that's on us. Now, sure. I'm not saying, I still think that whole thing is flawed for so many reasons, but yeah.
We need to get onto the video. We have literally watched 3 minutes of it, so we are chatty Cathy's.
Policies in place. Of course, in the New Testament, we're called to an even higher calling than that, and it's not national, it's individual and all this other stuff. But I have a video on the topic of slavery. You guys can check in the link below. So what you can see is that this is just like absolutely manifestly not true. Like it's just not true that the Bible supports killing, rape, and slavery. Like that's a lie. That's a lie somebody's believing. And then the heart issue comes in, and this is the part that's the harder one to deal with, and that is understanding the fear of the Lord. That this is the beginning of wisdom. If we approach God, and this, okay, I'm going to tell you guys, just me talking here, flow of thought.
I don't know what he's saying right now.
I don't know how to fix somebody on this issue. All I know how to do is point it out.
You said pause it?
All I know in the conversation is to change the subject from understanding a passage in context. If that's
and just that sentence, the beginning of wisdom is fear of God.
Right? Yeah, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, dude.
Well, I mean, the clear toxicity of that notion should be apparent to everybody with any kind of clear mind. Like that we should be driven, that gaining wisdom in our life is dependent on us fearing this thing that's also supposed to love us unconditionally, though it, depending on your interpretation, can send us to eternal punishment. And also that he has no actual evidence to support its existence. Yet the beginning of wisdom is fearing it. It just, and he says this like, this is what annoys me, like saying that as just a matter of fact, like it's this obvious thing that is just the case. And he, like he said, he doesn't know how to help us. I don't know how to help someone that's like that. And it's, again, that level of arrogance.
Yeah.
That is why, when people tell me, why don't do you bother engaging with these things? Why don't you worry about other stuff? Like, what does it matter what people believe? It's, why do you get angry about, why do you hate God or like all this stuff? No, what I hate is this kind of arrogance. They just, whatever. I made my point. Let's see where else it goes.
That's not important to them. If that doesn't matter to them, it's even offensive to some people. I've discussed these things online with people who, when I go, well, when you look at it in context, and then they start mocking and ridiculing me for looking at something in context. And I want you to think about the.
No, they're not mocking you for looking at it in context. They're mocking you for thinking that the context justifies your immoral nonsense.
Well, I was gonna ask you, so like as a moral realist for you, like is there a context at which owning another person as property is moral to you?
No.
Like,
and that's the point, that these are excuses, and it's ironic that he wants to claim that moral objectivity comes from religion, and then at the same time he wants to talk about how this, slavery was the custom at the time, and then talk like a complete moral relativist. Bring your context. I'm not mocking you for looking at the context. We should all look at the context. I mock you because you think that the context somehow makes the clearly repulsive and immoral teachings of your ideology any better. And while then lecturing us about not being able to have morality outside of God, of claiming that we don't have a foundation, while this is what you do with your morality. You make excuses for slavery. You make excuses for sexism and homophobia. And you make excuses for the idea of eternal punishment, because you just define it arbitrarily as just because it's what you think God desires. And that's all that matters. So.
Depth of self-confusion that is there when you actually don't want to understand the Bible in context because you might not hate it so much. Like then you're dealing with the heart issue. Okay, so I stopped talking about the context and I want to start talking about the heart. But how do you talk to a stranger on the internet or a random person?
Can I state that, like, my heart pumps blood? Well, that's just what it does. Like to talk about.
He's being metaphorical.
I get that, but to talk metaphorical, like like to dissect that, like, what do you mean? Okay, well, I mean, like if you talk heart and you go that route, well, then what you mean by that should be, owning people's fucking bad, right? That should be like going to your heart. Like that should be the going to your heart part.
But that's how backwards these people are.
That's really shitty, right? When you're like, hey, I want to go to your heart. Let me help you find out in your heart that really we can justify the situation where this person is owned. That's just is fucking weird to me.
Right, and he says, if you understood the context, you wouldn't hate the Bible so much. No, I understand the context, and the context makes it just as bad. And the context makes me, obviously, I don't know the guy. I can't, I don't hate someone I don't know, but I don't respect you because you think that there's a context to these things, and that somehow that context justifies that kind of behavior. So let's see what else.
About their heart issues. This is a challenge every time. It's always difficult. As Proverbs says, like when you bring correction to someone who's like a fool.
For your heart issues, Proverbs says
they may turn and attack.
Thou shalt not eat McDonald's French fries. Like what? I don't know what you mean.
They may hate you for it. But a wise man, if he's corrected, he will love you for it. Right? Because those are the wounds of a friend. Those are the hurts that heal. So the fear of the Lord, there's just two things I'll mention briefly, and we'll go into the Numbers passage, then we'll do all your questions today. And the best answers I can give you guys off the cuff that I'm able to, and I hope they help you think biblically about everything. There's two things that stand out to me as I was thinking about this. One is arrogance, and the other one's entitlement. Now, forgive me, I'm already
beautiful projection.
People, I know it, because I just used some.
Right there, like. Right, this is why I wanted to.
By the way, arrogance. This is what I think. Especially when you're talking about like the arrogance of like you're arrogant for thinking that we have a position at which condones the owning of another person.
This is why I want you to watch this video.
What's going on, Danny? And what's going on? God equals square of I'm sorry. God equals square root of -1. I just fumbled that. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for everyone who's tuning in. I wanted. Is Danny I think I talked to Danny once.
Yeah, Danny's. I've talked to Danny a couple times on Discord.
It was about
we have
that...
me and him have a very kind of like a similar attachment to like intentionality and like normativity in general and like implications of that. I think he's a dualist and he uses arguments within that realm.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but was Danny the person that was using somehow the is-all distinction in the context of... I forget exactly. Maybe I'm confusing people, but there was some...
I don't want to straw man his position. I know. I think he takes rule following arguments as a position to consider against physicalism.
Okay,
and
yeah. So I definitely would like to have him on because I don't understand that.
And then I think he debated T-jump on I can't remember what the topic was, to be honest.
I think it was physicalism against
physicalism and dualism. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I would like to have Danny on if he would like to come at some point, because
I'm sure he would.
I don't think I agree with him on a lot of stuff, but it would be a cool conversation to have. Anyway.
I agree. I think that would be interesting.
But yeah, so this is why I wanted you to see this video, because I found it so ironic that he's talking about entitlement and arrogance, and then he believes in the stuff that he believes and talks about it the way he talks about it. It's just, the projection is hilarious to me.
Sure. Okay. Well, better deliver.
Really strong words to describe a posture of somebody who looks at God and thinks, you owe me and you got some explaining to do. But I think that these are the two issues that lead to...
Assuming you think the entity exists.
Those. Okay. I think God owes me. When I think God owes me, or he owes humanity, that he creates humans and he owes us certain kinds of better treatment than, say, judgment or punishment or something like the sorrowful death of a child or something. And I think you owe me better than that, God.
No, it's for me, and I don't know about you, Cease, because we have different moral positions, clearly, but for me, it's like, what is the normative standard? How ought I behave, and how is that derived? Like, are you stating it from descriptive premises? Are you just telling me, like, this is a thing, and therefore I ought to be, good because in virtue of this descriptive assessment I have? Because then I just reject it, right? I don't understand this, like, smuggling of values.
So his alternative...
entitlement.
Sorry.
So he said it's a sense of entitlement, but it's not. The alternative is just submit to that which is in power, because somehow the fact that it's in power gives it a right over us. The fact that he created us means he can kill us or do as he wants with us, because we're just objects who are here to worship this thing. This is why I say that theism is inherently tyrannical and authoritarian in nature. I agree with Hitchens when he made that argument. It's not that I'm entitled or that I think I'm owed anything. That if you're the one telling me that this God is a God of love, and then I see the kind of violence and loss and destruction that I see in the world, well then yeah, I'm going to have questions. God can answer those questions, or he doesn't have to answer those questions. But it's not entitlement to want to ask the question. It's and the alternative is, like I said, just submitting and to and thinking of yourself that you have no inherent worth. Like, your only worth is to just exist as whatever God wants you to be, and however, whatever God wants to do to you. It's fine, and it's entitlement if we reject it or if we have a problem with it. Then we're entitled and arrogant, because I think it's fucked up that people die and get raped and horrible things happen on a daily basis. It's entitlement to question how a loving God could let that happen. I mean, this is delusional on such a severe level.
Right. And if we approach God with that, we act like God is our servant and we are his master. I don't know how to fix that except to point out the folly of it. That God doesn't, I mean, he lovingly provides for us, but to think that he owes us that is a different step, isn't it?
Well, you don't, this, look, talking in the context, he's talking to probably the person that asked the question who's a Christian or something, I think, if I remember that correctly. He's just baking in the God part. To someone like me or you, it's just obviously going to beg the question. But
okay,
that's a problem.
Actually,
this approach of entitlement can really spoil.
So these are so he's just said God lovingly provides for us, but he's not. He doesn't have to. Like, we're not entitled to be provided for, despite the fact that he defines God as loving, which to me, unless he's defining loving as whatever God is, just by arbitrary definition, would entail being taken care of in some regard. But these are the same kind of people that then talk about the relationship with God as a parent and a child. Well, does a parent not have a moral duty to take care of its children once they brought them into the world? It just doesn't. It never adds up. It's always inconsistent.
Sure. Yeah, and if you're just taking that horn that it's good because, in virtue of God, or because God says so, or just in virtue of God. That's just a devoid and vacuous meaning to me of like what it means for something to be good.
Yeah.
In the first place, it's just like, I'm already a subjectivist, right? So it's like, if you're gonna go that far down to where it's just like it's whatever the creator makes it, then it's like, as an objective thesis, that's just devoid of meaning. Like, that's what it means to be subjective. Yeah.
So
anyway,
let's see. Here you go.
Spoil us as we're reading scripture and we reach passages of judgment like the one in Numbers that we're going to talk about in a second. This is a passage where God judges a nation, and an entitlement mentality says he's not being nice to them. He's being cruel. He's being judgmental. He's judging. He's actually killing people. Like, God can't do that. Like, we deserve better than that. That sense of entitlement is the sort of starting point for how we're going to look at and evaluate God. But on Judgment Day, when we stand before God, truly stand before God to be judged, no one is going to be able to raise their hand and say, God, I have a list of things you owe me. Like, this is why the second issue is arrogance. And arrogance is thinking that you can tell God what his business is. I think when you approach a passage where God punishes sin, there are two diametrically opposed responses. One, wow, sin must be really bad. Or two, wow, God must be really bad. I think that we need to fall on the sin must be really bad category, lest we move it.
I'm waiting for I'm not interested in like the baked in theological components into it, and more about the like what it is about it that makes it okay.
We know what is arrogance? You believing nonsense that you can't justify in any kind of way that's not circular. You know what is arrogance? You thinking that because something is I mean, this is no different than saying, oh, how entitled are citizens that are suffering under this dictatorship to think that they have human rights? Oh, it's fine to remove dictators on Earth because God is the exception, because God is the creator of all things. So somehow, if you're just more powerful, that somehow makes the abuse and the violence okay. Yeah, this is blatant support of tyranny. That's all that is.
Into a type of like philosophical insanity. I mean, the idea that God, the one who knows the hearts, who knows the purpose, who knows the plan, who's morally pure and perfect, that he is the one who's in error as we read him punishing sin. And sometimes that punishment, I would say, I'm
trying to think of like what, like, it seems like like if you wrote a syllogism out for like what he's saying, it's like to state, I'd have to write it out, but it seems like I don't even know if I could apply a principle of charity where you don't beg the question, right? Like, I get he's talking to the theist in this case.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I get that system like presupposition or just baked in kind of thing to it, but it's like as an actual explanation for why it's good, it still just doesn't like slice anything down to like what it means to be good, other than, well, in virtue of what God says. And then in that case, like, it doesn't matter anything I say. You're a dealer that's going to deal me a hand that I can't win at all times.
This is why this kind of theism is a cancer, because he hasn't defined anything about morality. He's basically defined, if he just defines in principle God as being perfectly moral. So if God kills or rapes, or I mean tells us to rape, or tells us it's okay to own people, well, who are we to question that? Because God is the morally perfect superior being. So automatically, by definition, it will make those behaviors moral. That is insanity. To actually hold a position as a credible blueprint to live your life by is what is insane, and what is arrogant, and what is delusional. Someone like myself looks at this kind of thing and recognizes that he's done no work to actually define morality. He's just trying to bypass and beg the question entirely, and then gets annoyed when he gets challenged. So let me just post this.
Oh, I was just reading that.
Season Mike, just a reminder that everything you're trying to say is a category error. God is special and can't be judged by anything you say. He's so unknowable that we know he's right.
Close down the stream. I'm ending the stream.
No, obviously I think it's being sarcastic, but like that is...
Yeah, we lose. It's over, guys.
But that is the mentality of that people like Mike Winger has. That because he's already defined this thing as one, existing, two, being perfect, then there's no place to go from that.
Yeah.
So it's anyway, sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just waiting for him to get out of like the realm of like a presupposed theology, but
flows onto even kids, and that's an intense moment. And that's like, wow, this is it doesn't get any more intense than this. But yet I'm coming from a posture of I respect God, I trust God, and I know that he has an eternal and perfect plan for all the future things. So I look and I say, God, you have a right to judge your creation as you see fit. And you have reasons, whether I'm always familiar with them or not. That's the fear of the Lord. That's the beginning of wisdom. And
that is pure
dogmatism. I don't know how to make people feel that way. I want to talk to them about it, pray for them, and ask the Lord to work on their hearts. But
thank you.
Lest I go on too long on the first question, let's just quickly run through the Numbers passage, and I'll show you guys how context is sometimes rejected in these discussions. I'm going to read verses 17 and 18 because these are the verses that people often read. No, now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known man by lying with him, that is, having sex. But all the young girls who have not known man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. This is how I've heard this verse promoted online when people say things like the Bible supports rape. This is how I've heard it used. So the Israelites are to go out into other nations, and they're to just kill everybody except for the girls they keep alive, so they can have them as, and here's the term I've heard used, sex slaves, because that would be the promotion of rape and slavery.
Okay, Mike, before we hear your version of the events, let's get a poll.
Okay, let's see what
does anybody and we have somebody in here, your way or Yahweh tested by fire. What can you possibly interpret? Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and every woman who has known man by lying with them, but all the young girls who have not known man by lying with them.
Remember, he started off this video saying the Bible doesn't promote killing. Just to keep in mind the context. Let's see what it says.
Okay. Cease, do you have any idea on what this guy could potentially and even possibly justify this as?
No, but I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of mental and verbal acrobatics he's about to perform for us here.
Boom, 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 boom,
Let's-
boom, 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 boom.
And yeah, by the
Bum,
way,
bum,
just
bum.
to address the comment, we can email me back. I sent you an email. If you
I was gonna say, I was like, during our debate, I was like, I didn't know we had a debate.
No,
actually.
I'm gonna be debating him on whether Christianity is true.
That's easy.
But I thought it was supposed to be on modern day debate. I'd be happy to do it on our channel or there. We'll figure it out. Just
Okay, got it.
send me a follow up email when you get a chance, and we
Sure.
can figure out. So anyway,
killing, rape, and slavery are all right there in these passages. Let's unpack that a little bit.
yes.
The killing is judicial, and it is rare. It is like this never happens, and it's forbidden to happen at other.
Objective means that okay. Objective means that a moral dilemma cannot have an exception. That's what it means for the moral dilemma to be objective. So we've already just taken an objective standard and said, "Fuck you, go long," and you threw it away. Like, right? Like that's just literally what you did. Okay. Anything you got before I press the play button?
No, I mean, I think it's fine that he says he justifies the killing by just saying it's judicial. So, as though, and that's the context to him that, oh, well, this killing is judicial. Okay. So,
all right.
Other times, it is only through the direct command of God. So this is a judicial command. God is judging, and he's not suggesting in this passage, which easily, especially in a cancel culture like we have now, where you could take one sentence out of context and then, condemn a person because of it.
Look, we could just grant that people do that. Like that's like there's nothing to do with what's going on. I don't know why he does this a lot.
This is meant to be a statement in context. Anybody who cares about understanding the text rightly knows this is specifically about the Midianites, specifically about a group of people who, according to the text of Scripture, had hundreds of years of rebellion against God, and now their whole society and culture has to end.
Okay, pause.
Catch that?
What?
So no,
what the
hold
fuck?
On. Hold on. Cease, did you catch that? They deserve to die. Like, look, Cease, look, man, we had this all wrong the whole time, man. Like, it's not that, like, like, let me hold on. Let me explain the verse that says, "Kill every man and little one," and do this dance and say, "Look, they had to die." That's the explanation. What?
Yeah. So I mean, that's,
what is that?
Here's
Mike,
the context. This is the context
of
Mike Winger. The context that we're all so arrogant of, so ignorant of, and ignoring, is that these people disobey God, so they deserve to die. That's the context, and it's a judicial killing, and God says to do it, so it's moral because God says to do it.
Yeah.
And if only we understood that context, we wouldn't have a problem with it. Like, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Sorry, if you're a new viewer, by the way, don't listen at work or listen with headphones because about after like 2 minutes or so, we will drop some language. I try not to, but this is ridiculous. Like, we're gonna justify killing by saying they just had to die.
Oh, and by the way, if we have a problem with the idea that an entire culture deserves to die from a God that could have the power to change their hearts in a snap, now we're entitled. Now we are arrogant because how dare we challenge the extermination of an entire people, good or bad that they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they rebelled against God. Well, so if I took that line of reasoning, I deserve to die and you deserve to die and everybody that's an atheist deserves to die, like, because we're rebelling against God, apparently.
Look, even if this was the worst society that had the worst kind of behavior, right? If you're an all-powerful deity, you could change that from happening without having to spill a drop of blood. At least incarcerate these people so nobody has to continue suffering if they're so sinful and so horrible in whatever way they're disobeying you. Like, let's assume this culture, the society was entirely made up of rapists and killers.
Cease. I don't even have to go that far. Do you think if somebody, if something that was that powerful and supernatural could come down and like threaten you in a way that you would deliberately just like, fuck that, I can take him later. Whenever I disobey him, like it'll be fine. Like I'll be able to handle it. No, nobody would do that. Nobody would like deliberately be like, yeah, I can take that thing. They just submit to whatever it was for the sake of their well-being. That's what's so weird. What's so weird to me about it is like this idea of like they disobeyed. It's like clearly in the eyes of the writer from me, they're just writing things about people at which they think, but like it's not the case at which, you know, like they're making itself. It's just such a weird storyline to me because like even if I'm not a believer and something comes down to me and it's like, look, I'm just gonna kill you and everything if you don't obey me. It's like, look, I'll obey you, like, and then I'll try to figure my way out of it. I'm not gonna be like, yeah, all right, whatever, and then just die later on. Like, it's just such a weird thing. It's so weird to me.
I mean, they pretend like, oh well, they deserve to die because God sent messages to them telling them to listen. Clearly, they didn't believe that those messages came from God himself. If they did, then the reaction would have been a different one. But again, or let's say with the weirdest scenario that they did believe in him and just didn't give a fuck.
Well, you know what? Actually, we're thinking about this a little to go another layer. This is a God that's like telling them to take every young woman. They're probably like, look, fuck you. I don't want to be with you. And then they're like, you're disobeying me. And it's like, yeah, because you're an evil fucking prick. Look what you want to do. Like, yeah, you know, it actually starts to make sense now when you think about it, you know. You're disobeying the God that wants to keep young women for yourself. Yeah, good on you. You should probably disobey that thing, you know. Like,
all right, let's see where he goes.
Not about the Israelites. It's about them. Their culture's being ended. God's destroying and ending their culture. Any of the males who would survive and live on into adulthood would probably continue the same disgusting and perverted culture with bestiality and who knows what kind of other things were going on, false worship. Of course, some think it's no big deal if you're worshiping a false god. But
here's the problem about what he's talking about, like in virtue of like bestiality or any of these things that he talks about. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong that he can point out. It wouldn't matter if it was not that or if it was something else. It's only wrong in virtue of God deeming it to, right? So
like, obviously I disagree with you there.
No, I'm not saying it's wrong. No. Listen, I'm not making. Hear me right. I'm saying that when he deems when they deem these things wrong, it's only in virtue of God saying it's wrong. It would make no difference if he said that it wasn't wrong, right?
Sure.
That's what nothing about my system comes in here.
Trust me. Okay, yeah.
I think that's clearly wrong from my vantage point. Okay. Yeah. What I'm saying. What I'm saying is, let's just clarify. Let's plant our flags here on this sensitive topic. What I'm saying is that when Winger makes the statement, when Winger goes, well, who imagine if they're doing these things, it wouldn't. Yeah, like to bring that up, you just have to bring up something that God disagrees with, and that's not moral, right? Like. It's as if he passes these things off as if they're wrong within themselves, like normal people think, right? Normal people go, yeah, this is like a wrong act. And then there's like some reason of what they give, where he's just, the only reason he could give is an arbitrary assessment of like, God thinks it's wrong, right? So it's like, it wouldn't matter if he's listing bestiality versus not bestiality, right? Yeah. Like whatever it deemed was wrong would be wrong. So sorry. And also make that clarification before someone thinks something else of myself. So.
But also keep in mind that these are the same people that when you point to the problem of evil, they'll say, well, God respects our free will. And then, you know, at the same time, we'll talk about how God, because these cultures would have kept doing what they were doing, comes and annihilates them. Like, where's the respect for free will then? Like, did he just change his mind? Can a perfect being change his mind?
Sure.
Like, it's completely inconsistent. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Now that we cleared that up.
That we know that.
Yeah. Don't at me with that shit.
that's where we're going to be disagreeing with God on that topic. So this is not something to be repeated. This was a one-time thing, right? It happened just as they're entering the land, as God's judging.
I think
and
he
removing
even
those
said
nations.
it just then. Hold on.
Why is it, though, that the women are killed and the young girls are going on false worship? Of course, some think it's no big deal if you're worshiping a false god, but that's where we're going to be disagreeing with God on that topic.
See, right. So he even adds the caveat, right? So the first thing he listed was bestiality. The second thing he listed was like false prophets, right? False gods. And then he said, in virtue of what? Well, that it's disagreeing with God, right? The assessment of God, right? So that's the only standard that matters, right? And he would agree to that. Yeah. So it just wouldn't matter if it was, no, you can worship false idols or you can do, right? It wouldn't, there's no actually like, there's no thing that's elucidating on why it's good. It's just in virtue of some subjective standard. But anyway.
So this is not something to be repeated. This was a one-time thing, right? It happened just as they're entering the land, as God's judging and removing those nations. Why is it, though, that the women are killed and the young girls are left alive? Is this like a type of sex slavery, as I've heard it presented online from many people?
Well, what's the caveat or what's the entailment, Mike? Kill every woman, right? Like, but what's the like part that matters as the entailment to the woman? It's whether they had sex with a man. That's what matters in context. That's right. That's the context.
And also, he's attacking a position that people don't hold. And nobody's saying that the Bible is telling us now, today, on a Wednesday, that we should go out and kill people. Like, it's not that the Bible is telling us to kill right now. It's the idea that the Bible justified that killing. Mm-hmm. And that in that context, according to God and according to the Bible, that genocide was moral. So what more do you need? Like, keep going.
And those who present it to me online, I'm convinced that most of the ones I've interacted with, they don't care what it really means. Like, they don't care. They get angry when I try to explain it.
Yeah, because you don't give, because I'm starting to get angry because you present the argument as an argument in which the person doesn't understand the context.
Right.
But then when we point out the context that the entailment of killing every woman is only in virtue of the women that have slept with men, right? That's the context of it.
And the context is repulsive. And he's disgusting for trying to justify that type of thing.
It's disgusting that the fact that someone could think, I will make the argument at which the person who's pointing out why it's bad is saying, look at the fucking context. It's every woman that had sex with the man, like, just kill him. Okay, right.
We're looking at the context. We're not ignoring. We're looking at
a young girl, right? Yeah, let's look at the right. Exactly, we're looking at the context. But if it's a young girl who had not had sex with a man, keep them alive for yourself, right? Okay. Now, what speculation would I expect an apologist to hinge on? Is, well, you don't know what exactly you'd keep them alive for, right? Like, that's the only thing that someone could go, well, you don't know. And if you make that statement, then all you've done to me is show that you don't give a shit about thinking about the implications of what the context is derivative of in the first place.
I just want to read this comment.
But I just want to, that's my rant.
Dragons and Genesis podcast. It happened only one time. He apparently hasn't read the Bible. It happens in Joshua and a dozen times in Judges, and more in 1 Samuel, and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings. That's the other thing. Like, this claim that this is a one-time thing is also completely false. But anyway, yeah, let's keep going.
All right.
There's the hard issue. I set aside those conversations because I'm spinning my wheels. You don't care about the truth here. You want to be mad. So here's a few of the background things you want to know. This, you read about this in Numbers 22 through 25. Those four chapters right there. The king of the Midianites hired Balaam, who's a prophet, and to prophesy, like basically curse the people of Israel. Balaam can't curse them because God is protecting them and God's going to bless them. So multiple times he tries and fails. The one thing he does do is he seems to give Balak advice that what he needs to.
By the way, I'm going to play this again. But by the way, Mike knows this because he read a thing in a book. That's how he knows this. By the way,
to do is
sorry.
I love that he says, "Oh, well, you're just trying to be mad." It's like, yeah, I'm mad because we're looking at the context. The context doesn't resolve the problem, and you're supporting a really repulsive ideology. So it's not that we're just trying to be mad. It's that your beliefs are right to anger us, both in their complete lack of justification, but especially because of how morally reprehensible they are. And you are arrogant in having this kind of how do I say it? This approach where you're, the wise, looking down at us, trying to heal us and show us the way. You're a fucking idiot. Okay, that's
cause them to sin against God. And so what the Midianites do is they send their women who are trained in sexual practices as part of their religious orgies and stuff like that they do in their cult. And they send their women into amongst the Israelites, who start basically prostituting themselves out in a religious fashion. So their prostitution is something that is meant to draw the Israelites away from God so that God will curse them, because the Midianites just want to destroy the Israelites. Now, do you see there's a very different context than what you'd think reading those two verses?
No.
If you look at
resolves nothing.
Well, pack it up, Cease. It's time to retract everything we just said for the last hour and 20 minutes.
So I
get it now. Now it's okay.
Yeah, so some people may have been sent down the wrong path, in quotes, which obviously I don't believe, but that therefore justifies then taking young women into sex slavery because they did what they did. Like, now it's fine. That's the context.
Yeah, but there's no context at which an abortion is okay.
And by the way, why would God? Just I can't be bothered.
It's so weird. It's a weird position.
25, we get a little more details. Here we go, verse 1. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab.
While he lived in Shittim? All right.
That's I kept saying Midianites, Moabites, excuse me. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, right? So it's sex and idolatry are combined here in that culture. They're part of the same thing. These invited the people to the sacrifices, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And so this is all part of the judgment. This is the background of the judgment that then comes upon them. And the judgment is,
I don't know how a perfect being gets angry, but that's a separate thing.
Well, right.
Hey, you need to remove these Midianites. They're a cancerous culture. This is what they are. Their culture is going to destroy you. And morally and religiously and spiritually, as God's setting up his people, they're going to see how important it is that they keep themselves clean from the ungodly practices and beliefs of the people around them. And so let's talk about the girls, though, because this is the part, are they sex slaves? And this is the response to that. Deuteronomy 21:10. The women who had not been part of this practice, who had not used their bodies and to commit sexual immorality with the men of Israel in order to bring their idolatry into the people of Israel, the women who had not
they
been
had to be pure. Is that what you're going to say?
Part of that culture, who had kept themselves
pure. Is that what you're going to say, Mike?
They are left alive, but for what purpose? Deuteronomy 21:10 tells us about these sort of POWs.
Wow.
Sorry. I don't know if you guys hear that. Hopefully not. Someone's trying to call me. When you go out to war against your enemies and the Lord your God gives them into your hand and you take them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman and desire to take her to be your wife.
I like how he highlighted a beautiful woman, and then you go down and you see she should shave her head and pare her nails, and she should take off her clothes in which she was captured. Captured. What the fuck do you mean by captured? Fucking idiot. Jesus Christ.
And you bring her home to your house. Here's the procedure. Okay, this is the what if. Like, you see her and you want her to be your wife, not your sex slave, your wife. Here's the procedure that God puts in
order to get around this whole part about you taking her and capturing her. Here's a loophole. Thanks, God. You did it in Exodus 21 too. Thanks. Appreciate it.
In place for them in that culture. This is unheard of for them. And you bring her to your home, to your house. She shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall take off the clothes in which she was captured, and remain in your house, and lament her father and her mother a full month. The shaving, the hair and nails, and all these clothes. This is all about a few things. I guess there's three things going on here. One is ritual purity. Okay,
yeah, purity.
Levitical law, laws of Israel, lots of religion.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. What did I say? Purity in the eyes of what? In the eyes of being like just wrong because of the ideas that they had in virtue of them not worshiping God, and it wasn't moral. We go back in this circle of things not being moral just because God disagrees with it. You even admitted that was a statement. That is not a judgment of what is right or wrong. You're just giving a normative standard that is to obey God, but there's nothing at which, even if I granted the God exists, that dictates why I ought to give a shit about that. But anyway.
The context is if you disobey God, if you are what they define to be, engaged in sexual immorality, then your punishment is that you'll be exterminated. That's the context. Like, nobody's ignoring the context or strawmanning the Bible. This is.
Well, where's the volition?
I love how he thinks he's actually refuting these points when he's
because he's
literally proving them.
He's obfuscating the fact that there's no volition of the woman in this case. Like, where's the thing that says, like, if the woman decides that she just wants to go and say, hey, look, I had a great time, I might call you in a couple days, I'm just not really feeling it, where's that? I see none of that. I don't see like, hey, thanks for dinner. I don't see like,
you just stake them and make them your wife.
Yeah, I'll sell you the money back. Look, it's cool. I just not feeling it. I don't see that.
Let's see what else he says. This is just mind-boggling.
Religious purity that goes on there. So she's separating herself from the impurity of the culture she was part of before, and the religious stuff she may have been part of. And she's going to take off the clothes in which she was captured. Why? Because her status is being elevated. She is not going to be a slave for sex.
Against her will, she's being elevated.
And she'll remain in your house and lament her father and her mother a full month. You can't touch her for a month. This is the opposite of sex slavery. You can't.
Yeah, the opposite.
She goes through a mourning process.
So after 30 or 31 days, like, you get a reward to have sex with someone against their will.
You were taken against your will. You're married against your will, and eventually you're forced to have sex against your will. But just not for the only part that because you don't have sex for the month. Oh, then you're not a slave. Now you're not a sex slave. It's the opposite of sex. I mean,
look at the next line. After that, you may go into her and be her husband, right? Like, there's no after that you may ask her for consent of this. It's just, here's the rules at which none of this strips down and says volition of woman. There's none of that, right? There's none of that. Like, that would be the only thing in this thing where I'm going, like, at the very bare minimum, can you give me the volition of the woman to opt out of this situation? That does not exist, and it is literally a command against her will.
I mean, how is he? So basically, you get 30 days where you get to be by yourself, captured in a house that wasn't yours. And that to him is the opposite of sex slavery. Despite the fact that you're forced into a marriage, you're taken against your will, put into a house you don't want to be in, and forced into a culture that is, like I said, forced upon you. But that is not sex slavery. Oh, man. It's just...
Yeah, like, if we had any sex slavery type of situation and then gave these rules, would Mike say that it justifies that sex slavery? No, of course he wouldn't.
And people wonder why
but
we
what does
ridicule.
justify it? See, it's just the fact that it came from a god. That's it. That's the only thing that justifies it. That's the entire thing of this entire stream. It's the entire thing of the first question about evil being promoted. It's only evil in virtue if it disagrees with God, right? So like Mike never loses. He's always handing out as a dealer cards from a stack of cards he created, at which he knows, which ones play the hands that he wants them to, right? Like there's no way you can win unless you just buy into whatever the fuck game he's playing. And even then, it's just you just assume the god exists, and then it's okay, cool, whatever is said is said. Great morals. Sorry,
No.
I could go on forever. You shouldn't have shown me this video, dude. This is like infuriating.
Yeah,
disagreeing process. And then after that, you may go into her.
After that, you may now marry her against her will.
And be her husband, not her. She's not your concubine, right?
It doesn't. Oh, you're such a.
Oh, so it's okay that because
moron.
you now have the label husband, you can do. It's not rape because you have the title of husband.
I don't call people morons very often. This guy is a moron if he really thinks he's avoided any issue of volition just by stating a title, but some grunt that we came up with called husband, some subjective bullshit that we created, called marriage, and thinks that somehow sneaks in the value of volition on behalf of the woman. Like, to think that that's the case is like, I either feel really bad for the way his brain processes things, or he is just genuinely an idiot, or he's just very deceptive, which I don't think he is.
No, I think he's genuinely stupid.
I don't think he's deceptive. I think he legitimately has not actually sat down and thought about these things, or has just ignored them when they pop up into his head.
No, I think this is the horror of religion, that it can make otherwise normal seeming people believe the worst kind of disgusting, horrifying things. I just want to post this real quick. Andreas writes, I want to thank Mike Winger and his ilk. It is people like him who made me become deeply disgusted with my former Christian faith. So in a way, they're doing the work for us by exposing themselves.
I would agree.
I was going to say I would love to have him on just to watch him squirm when actually challenged. But at the same time, I don't really want to give.
Every time I've tried to get somebody on that's like Matt Slick and people like that,
they run.
And Sean McDowell, they've like messaged me, and then they either look at a video or something, and they never respond back to our email ever.
Yeah, it is hard to get people to actually engage in debate. I remember the guy that what was his name, Pointless Thorns or whatever, that other idiot.
Sure.
We kept going on for months.
Yeah, it took me forever.
And he would talk so much shit online. He would just talk all this arrogant nonsense, and then in the debate he was terrified. Like his demeanor, his body language, he was so scared to be talking to you, and it was so weird. I should clarify that. I think he might be right. This is a little unfair. Mike isn't stupid, but he's doing all this backwards. He believed Jesus saved his life. He's justifying everything else after the fact. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you're right.
I'm sorry. I'm going to kind of hold firm and say someone might be dumb, at least at the bare minimum, if they don't look at. So like, this kind of goes to the point that Otangelo is making here and saying, like, under what moral standard am I criticizing Winger? So for the point that I'm making here, I'm not making a moral point. I'm not saying like, I don't even need to make like this is wrong. I'm showing that he's obfuscating on something that he knows is wrong, right? He's starting to say like, well, after that, you may go be your husband. But what does he avoid admitting? The fact that the woman has no choice in the matter, right? He never will want to admit that point. If pressed, I guarantee you he'd make an excuse about it. And if that is the case, maybe that's a little unfair to decide what he would say. I don't like talking for people. But what I would say is that it's not a point about morals. It's a point about obfuscating from the fact that the woman doesn't have a choice. And then we could get into a secondary point of whether that's moral or not. I think that's immoral, but when this is the point that I want to make really quickly, and something I'll have to talk about in my debate here on Thursday, is that people don't get about anti-realists or people that are subjectivists is that there is no thesis from our perspective at which morality is objective. Morality only exists in virtue of what we kind of collectively come together to determine what is right or wrong. So it's going to just be in virtue. Anytime someone brings that up to me, it's a similar point. It's a point that Cease has made to me. I just think everybody does operate off the exact same values, which is their well-being. So whenever it comes down to like, you not wanting to be with God in heaven or in hell, right? And wanting to be with God in heaven. It's not that you want to be moral because of God. It's because you want to be moral because it's in virtue of your well-being. Everybody has that tendency. And so I don't, when someone's like, oh, in virtue of what standard, everybody uses the same standard if we break it down. It's just in virtue of well-being at all cases, whether it's a selfish version or not. Everybody does it. I just disagree with whether or not that's an objective fact of the matter. That's it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do want to, one, address that, but also kind of fix my statement earlier. Maybe he's not stupid, but he's incredibly intellectually dishonest. You have to be doing what he's doing. That aside,
you have to. There's no way you could read that and then go, and someone bring up like, okay, well, does the woman have free choice in the matter? And him go, well, I didn't think about that. Like, if he said that, then he's stupid. And I don't say that I don't even like saying that on this channel because I know how that comes off. But like, if somebody, in virtue of what we're talking about, like, which is holding people captive and not considering these aspects, if you didn't consider that, we're talking the context because Mike loves context. If we're talking about like the captivity of women and then them, going through this process against their will, and you haven't considered their feelings, then I do think you're stupid. And I think you deservedly should be mocked in some way that you're dumb, because I don't know how there's any other way to get you to listen at that point.
Well, I don't know that, that gets anybody to listen either, but I think ultimately it's more about other people listening in who may not know where to head, kind of expose what these ideologies are. I do want to address something that's an interesting point here. Isn't the ability to rationalize many contradictory positions actually a sign of intelligence? I mean, to me, I don't think so. I think some people might define it that way. I wasn't aware if that's a definition of intelligence. To me, if you're rationalizing contradictory positions, it's not intelligence. That's intellectual dishonesty.
I would just say your definition of intelligence almost indistinguishable of that of deception.
Right. So. As far as Otangelo's question, the standard is reality. That the standard is the nature of consciousness and the states that it leads to.
Where's this question?
Earlier he said, what is a standard?
Okay. What is,
now,
yeah, I was gonna say for you guys could that's definitely a more an example you could definitely go after if you think there is some objective standard.
Now, as far as him saying, the laws are not binding anymore, that's not really relevant. The question is, does the Bible say what it says in the context it says it in? And is that something that we can have a judgment about?
Well, that's an admittance of subjective morality from his standpoint. He just loses if he says that the laws aren't binding. It's like it's either the moral dilemma is either objectively wrong or it's not. If it changes, then you just admitted to relativism. That's all you did.
Not necessarily, because I think something can change and still have like.
I don't know about that. If the dilemma's wrong, if it's an mind independent thing that's wrong, then the attitudes of laws based on minds should not, right? Those laws should not be dependent upon a mind changing it. That would be the definition of subjectivism.
Oh no, it should be subjective, but I don't know that it would be relative in the same sense.
Okay, well, I would just what I'd more so argue is that you can't state an objective moral system is all I'm saying.
Right.
Maybe not relative. I'd probably die on the hill of relativism, but that's less of the point. More of the point is to say, like, Otangelo could not claim objectivism if he's going to make an argument. Like, oh, these things dependently change upon the mind or time.
But also, he would do the same thing that Mike here is doing, which is just to say, what is moral is what God says is moral, which illuminates nothing about the issue, and again conflates morality with power.
To me, it does. To me, it's you lose the debate like immediately when you say that.
Right.
You just immediately say it's dependent on the mind of God. It's subjective, and I don't even have to say a word. I'm like, thanks for coming. You just literally admitted your thing is subjective, and you don't. And what's worse is that you don't realize it.
You want to watch a couple more minutes and then see what get into the end of this question?
Yeah, let's get to the end of this and let's do it.
Right, she's your wife. So this is definitely not that kind of sex slavery stuff. I'm sorry, I don't know why my phone's blowing up. I'm
okay. Strip away the sex slavery stuff. Does a woman have rights over her autonomy, or does she not? It's just a simple question.
Does she consent to being his wife, or was she made his wife? Just because you call her a wife after you kidnapped her and eventually forced her into sleeping with you doesn't make it not sex slavery. Like.
It's a really weird hill to die on, Mike.
Oh, God. Anyway.
Oops. I'm just going to check and make sure I don't have a problem with the stream that people are trying to tell me about.
I'm just going to make sure that I don't, didn't make a mistake. I did, by the way.
No. Okay, as far as I can tell. All right. We have all 20 questions in today, just so you guys know, all 20 have already...
Oh, I guess he's done with that one. Let's make sure though, real quick.
Been loaded. I will be answering them all one at a time.
And, so I think he's moving on after this.
Your friend of mine. Please stop.
All right. So
just real quick, I before we end up here, I just want to respond to this. What Andrew says, which clearly he didn't listen to a word you said, which he never does. Morals can only be objective if they are imposed ought to be coming from God. If they depend on our subjective minds and opinions, they are not morals anymore whatsoever. No, by definition, your morality is subjective. It is dependent on the will of the arbitrary will of your imaginary God. I never said that from my perspective, it comes from opinions. It comes from the nature of consciousness, which is a fact of nature. So there's nothing.
Well, so for Otangelo, there needs to be something to be drawn in the sand, and especially since he always says the atheist worldview, which is just to point out the fact that me and you have, we have overlapping worldviews in some cases, and then in some cases we don't. And this is another one, right? We're both atheists, but we both don't have the same opinion on meta ethics. So just to point that out. But the first sentence you've already fucked up, Otangelo, and that's to say morals can only be objective, and then you add a conditional statement that is that if they are imposed oughts coming from God. Literally, if you're stating coming from God, you've just made them mind dependent
and subjective to God.
And if your implication is if P then Q, right? P therefore Q. That is as sound as saying if the moon is made of cream cheese, then it's Tuesday. The moon is made of cream cheese, therefore it's Tuesday. The implication is just wrong, and it's even worse than that. It's contradictory to what P is. Q is a direct contradiction of P, right? Morals can only be objective. It would be P. If they are imposed, coming from God would be Q. Those are contradictory, because if you're talking about it coming from God, that is subjective. It's mind dependent versus mind independent. You just literally created a contradiction in your first premise.
One last comment, unless people have questions before we end here, then you take this time now to ask anything. Even incorrect ideas can be internally rationalized. Believers aren't typically unreasonable. They just have bad influence and biases. Like inside their heads, it does all make sense generally. I think, again, it kind of depends on how you're defining being reasonable. Like, yeah, I think
conspiracies can be internally consistent.
Yeah, I think if someone's not capable of going logically, like using the tools of philosophy and justification from point A to point B, and assumptions are being made left and right, I don't. Even if it can make sense to them, I don't know that I would call that reasonable. I would call that kind of ignoring, being driven by biases. Like you said that in the sentence too. Like, I don't think that's so much about reasons; it's about biases clouding providing actual justifications for your beliefs. If you can provide valid justifications, I don't know that you can call that reasonable. Now, again, we might disagree on what will constitute valid justification, and I think that's probably the core problem there.
Sure.
Anybody have any questions that you guys want to ask before we?
Yeah, if there's any questions, go ahead and get them in quickly. We'll answer them. I'll give this time to give a reminder that on Thursday, I was trying to think of the date, but I don't think I'll get the date. Thursday next week, I will be doing a debate with John Fisher on moral realism versus moral anti-realism, and then I'll debate Ethio on whether or not I'm a narcissist or not, because apparently he thinks I'm a narcissist.
He may be calling Mike the guy we just.
I know. I was just having fun with it.
And I'll be on Thursday. I'll be having a conversation.
Yeah, I know, Ethio. I know. I was just messing with you.
No. I'm saying on Thursday I'll be having.
No, I saw his comments and he was like, "No, not you." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I know. I was just messing." I've seen him. I feel like I've seen him comment before, so I figured he was referring to Mike.
I think I'll be on.
Here we go. Question, real quick. Oh, sorry. You said you're going to be on what?
I'm trying to remember the date. My brain is fried right now. I think it will be on the Promethean experience, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll be debating free will and determinism. As far as, do each of you lean foundationalist or coherentist?
I leaned foundationalist, but I don't really. I'm kind of a skeptic of a lot of positions.
Yeah, I probably lean more foundationalist as well. The problem is with all these frameworks, you run into problems.
Yeah, I would agree. That's kind of where
and
I'm
so
at.
It always feels like there's something that's not quite right.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of trying to figure out all the details of my epistemology. I know kind of where I lean, but
I mean, you kind of have similar issues, like certain base axioms are just going to be like, unjustified at the root.
Yeah, like I would say, the only thing that I can be certain of is that I exist, and then everything else is a justified belief given the available tools and evidence that I have.
Gotcha. Well, so maybe me and you can have a conversation, because I think I took a similar position as you about presuppositions and how I don't. Oh, you're good. Presuppositions and how I think me and you both kind of made the claim that we don't really feel like we have them. I've actually come kind of to terms with that. I'm okay with accepting presuppositions under certain frameworks that I work with, because I've realized I don't really commit to certain things, but certain positions I'll argue for or against, I'm fine with kind of having certain presuppositions baked in for the sake of the argument. Maybe me and you can.
Yeah, because I think I probably disagree.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think you do as well, and I don't know. The more I hear T-Jump's position on it, the more I disagree with it. I think I will say.
See, I'm kind of the opposite way there. I think the more I hear his position on kind of his foundation, the more I think I tend to align with that perspective. Sure. Obviously, there are a lot of things I don't agree with him on, but I do think he makes sense as far as that foundation.
Well, guys, that should be it for us today. If you liked the show, please give us a like. And if you want to support us, you can at patreon.com/Axioms on Trial.
Just real quick, if there's anything for you. CJ asks, would you consider getting on a more realist philosopher and an anti-realist philosopher to talk? I like to
using companions and guilt. I like that. Yeah.
What does it mean by companions and guilt?
There's an there's
Sounds
pretty
familiar,
good.
but okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to go with you, which is like I always say the name wrong. It's the Frederick Geach problem. Geach. I think I said that right. And then there's companions and guilt, which is something that I'm fuzzy on because it's been like a few months. I always have a document open too. But yeah, I was actually meaning to kind of bring those up with you in virtue of like kind of your opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to
that
have.
would even be better to have two people that, you know, aren't like myself, who's I just kind of pick up things. And then you're like very specialized, like you're doing a very specialized thesis right now. But to have two guys to come on that are like specific in meta ethics, that'd be really great to hear.
Yeah, I would love to bring more guests. I mean, I'm emailing a few people currently to try to get some new guests on. So that would be great. But also, I would love to continue those conversations ourselves as well.
So yeah, here we go. I just wanted to give, before we get off, a quick Google search. Is that the basic thrust of the companions and guild arguments in ethics is the idea that if we reject objectivism about morality, then we are forced by parity of reasoning to reject objectivism about its target companions. And so maybe we can break that down. Yeah, so I was going to say in terms of epistemic, so CJ, it's a great point, because this is actually something I've been talking to with Frank, a buddy of mine, Frank, behind the scenes.
By the way, I want to have on as well.
I was gonna say who we'll have on the show. I've actually come to the position where I actually hit you up with this question the other day. See, so I said as a realist, what do you feel about implications of like an anti-realist, basically denying categorical imperatives about like meta ethics, and then in virtue of like an epistemic categorical norm, do you think like they would be kind of committed to denying epistemic categorical norms? And I think I'm on the boat where, depending on what you mean by an epistemic anti-realist, I think I would consider myself one, in the essence that there's no like categorical imperative on how ought we do one thing, or that we even potentially have the right answer. But I wouldn't be an anti-realist in that we could never know anything, because to me that falls more in the line of like some weird external skepticism or some world of like just knowledge in general. And maybe I would be, I don't know, I'm still kind of navigating that.
I definitely need to think about that a little more. I do think that there is probably some lack of consistency there from the perspective of the anti-realist. But also, obviously, like we've talked about before, I think they get their view on what is meant by ought incorrectly, and how values are derived incorrectly. So, but I do think that I think their views on morality, and then in relation to epistemology, I think there may be some tension there.
Sure.
Just real quick, do you think arguments change people's minds, or do you think people need an emotional connection to reconsider their positions? I think both. I think a lot of it depends on how open the individual is to hearing other arguments. And I think there are a lot of factors. I think definitely emotion is part of it. I think also, I think if you can show somebody how they're inconsistent in their framework, not by lecturing usually, but by asking questions, kind of I think more like the Aristotelian approach. I think and also, I guess you call like street epistemology type of thing. Like if you can,
like a Socratic method.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I'm going to say. My brain is all over the place. But point being is, if you can kind of bring those contradictions to light, to where you're kind of guiding them there, but without necessarily like lecturing your opinions at them, then perhaps either they'll be too dogmatic, they'll just look the other way and ignore what they found, or that observation will start crumbling away at their framework.
Yeah.
I think emotion definitely is
I think they help.
Role.
I think they help.
Yeah.
I think they help, but I think the thing is, and from every person I know, they're not convinced that God exists through a kalam, and they're not going to be unconvinced because the kalam is unsound, right? Like that, those aren't things that are just going to shatter their belief. What's going to shatter their belief is the real life application of it. It's how long are you willing to have God be indistinguishable for nothing? How long is it going to not answer your prayers? How long are you going to sit there and make excuses and say, okay, well, God exists, but it's not my time for right? Talk to any person that is no longer a believer. A lot of it's God stopped answering my prayers, or God did never answer my prayers, or I had no good reason to believe, right? It comes down to the emotional aspect of just a realization, and the arguments can help. But yeah, I don't think that an argument alone, this is my thing. I think Graham Oppie put it a good way, or maybe it was Oppie. Premises and arguments are like bus stops. Like you can get off whenever the fuck you want.
But I think
there's
also
no one stopping you to just put your stubbornness on.
But I think it also depends entirely on the person.
Sure.
I don't think that most of what I believe based on some prior emotional intuition. Like if I operated based on those things, I believe in free will, because I would like free will to be true, but I have found no convincing arguments to support it. So it just, I think, really depends on the kind of person that we're talking about, like how they approach engaging with reality.
Yeah. So. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. We will, I think we'll be back. I don't know, probably maybe this Thursday, or let's say maybe tomorrow. I guess tomorrow's Thursday, or perhaps the weekend. Well, we can't do Saturday, but next Saturday we will have a buddy of ours on who was kind of supposed to be one of the original hosts with us, but we've had some kind of scheduling issues and things like that. So we'll have him on. We'll talk meta ethics and possibly philosophy of mind, and start getting more into the philosophy stuff. But yeah, so we appreciate it, and stay tuned, and yeah, much love. Peace out, guys.